It begins with a small act, a ripple in the everyday, a moment of connection in a world that often rushes past. A woman in a quiet cafe, a man fumbling with his wallet, a simple tap of a card. This is where our story starts, in that unassuming gesture of kindness. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe quiet genius always finds a way, hit that like button and subscribe for more. For Alara Washington, it was an instinct, a natural extension of a spirit that found quiet satisfaction in easing the small burdens of others. She lived a life of careful routines and modest ambitions, her days filled with the hushed reverence of the community library where she worked as an archivist, a keeper of stories largely unread. Her own story felt much the same, filed away, valuable but unnoticed. She navigated her existence with a gentle fortitude, the kind born from navigating a world that often seemed to value noise over substance, flash over depth. Her strength was in her observation, in the way she saw the details others missed, in the empathy that ran like a deep, steady current beneath a calm surface. What she didn't know, as she tucked the strange receipt with its scribbled address into her pocket, was that this small act, this quiet ripple, was about to encounter a current far stronger than she could have imagined. But what happened next would change everything. Alara had always found solace in the order of things, in the meticulous cataloging of history and human experience that her job at the Oak Knoll Community Library afforded her. Her small apartment, filled with more books than furniture, was a testament to this love for narrative, for the past speaking to the present. She had come to this city years ago, carrying a quiet grief from the loss of her parents and a fierce determination to build a life on her own terms, a life of quiet dignity. She'd weathered disappointments, the subtle slights of being overlooked, the sting of opportunities that seemed to pass her by, channeling it all into a resilient grace. Her worldview was shaped by these experiences, leading her to believe in the power of small consistencies, of quiet acts of integrity. She wasn't one for grand gestures, but her belief in fundamental fairness was unshakable. Her closest confidant in this carefully constructed world was Mrs. Genevieve Ainsworth, the head librarian at Oak Knoll, a woman whose spirit was as robust and welcoming as the well-loved institution she managed. Mrs. Ainsworth, with her silver hair often escaping its neat bun and eyes that twinkled with decades of stories, had become a maternal figure to Alara. She saw the keen intellect and profound empathy beneath Alara's reserved exterior, often encouraging her to step out, to let her light shine a little brighter. The library itself, a charming old building nestled in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, was more than a workplace. It was a sanctuary, a bastion of community in the face of encroaching steel and glass. It was here, amidst the sin of old paper and binding glue, that Alara felt most herself. A subtle, insidious threat had begun to loom over Oak Knoll and the surrounding community in recent months. Marcus Thorne, a developer with a reputation for aggressive expansion and a portfolio gleaming with luxury high-rises, had set his sights on their neighborhood. His company, Thorne Development Group, was known for its slick presentations, its promises of urban renewal that often translated into displacement for long-term residents and beloved local businesses. Whispers of Thorne's ruthless tactics, of communities fractured and histories erased, had reached the quiet corners of the library. Alara had once seen him at a contentious town hall meeting, broadcast on local news. He was smooth, articulate, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the anxious faces of the residents questioning his plans. He dismissed their concerns with a practiced charm that Alara found deeply unsettling, a cold ambition glinting in his eyes that she recognized from too many stories of power misused. This was the background hum to her daily life, a low thrum of anxiety for the future of the place she called home. Alara possessed a remarkable ability to piece together disparate fragments of information, a skill honed by years of archival work. Friends often joked that she could find a needle in a haystack if only the needle had a catalog number. This quiet genius, this meticulous mind, was her greatest, often hidden, asset. The cafe, the daily grind, was Alara's usual morning stop, a small island of familiarity. That particular Tuesday, the man ahead of her in line, older, with a kind but worried face, was patting his pockets with growing agitation, his wallet clearly forgotten. Alara, without a second thought, had stepped forward. "I've got it," she'd said softly, tapping her card on the reader. The man, whose name she'd later learn was Arthur Henderson, had looked at her with such profound relief, mixed with an almost hunted expression, that it struck her as unusual. "Thank you, young lady. Truly, you don't know." He trailed off, his voice thick with an emotion that seemed too large for a forgotten coffee. Then he'd hurried out. When the barista, A young woman named Sarah with perpetually tired eyes whom Alara recognized as a regular, handed Alara her receipt. She'd added, he asked me to give you this. That's when Alara noticed the hastily scrawled address on the back. 17B Schiller Alley. Urgent. Alara's initial reaction was a blend of curiosity and deep-seated caution. Schiller Alley wasn't in a dangerous part of town, but it wasn't on any main thoroughfare either. It was one of those forgotten urban pathways, lined with the backs of old warehouses and shuttered storefronts. The word urgent pulsed with a significance she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just a thank you note. It felt like a message passed in near desperation. Her librarian instincts, the part of her that loved to unravel a story, to connect the dots, warred with her natural inclination to avoid trouble. She thought of Mr. Henderson's face, the genuine gratitude, but also that flicker of fear. She spent the day at the library, the address a tangible weight in her pocket. Her research skills, usually applied to dusty manuscripts, were now turned towards Schiller Alley. Online maps showed it as a narrow service lane. A quick search of property records for anything numbered 17B yielded nothing obvious. No listed businesses, no residential units. It was a dead end, which only deepened the mystery. That evening, she confided in Mrs. Ainsworth, showing her the receipt. The older woman examined it, her brow furrowed. Schiller Alley, Mrs. Ainsworth mused. That's near the old print district. Mostly deserted now, except for a few artist lofts and storage units. Urgent, he says. She looked at Alara. Your kindness, child, it sometimes finds the most peculiar paths to walk. If you go, be careful. Trust your instincts. They're sharper than you think. Bolstered by Mrs. Ainsworth's quiet encouragement, Alara decided she had to investigate. The next morning, a Saturday, she found herself standing at the entrance to Schiller Alley. It was damp, shadowed, smelling faintly of old paper and decay. Number 17 was a dilapidated 3-story brick building, its windows boarded up. Tucked beside a rusting metal door was a smaller, almost hidden entrance marked with a faded B. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. As she hesitated, a gruff voice startled her. Lost, miss. A security guard from a neighboring warehouse eyed her suspiciously. Alara, thinking quickly, adopted an air of mild academic confusion. Oh, hello. I'm researching old printing businesses for the Oak Knoll Library. I was told there might have been a small letterpress shop around here, a Schiller press perhaps? She offered a hopeful, unassuming smile. The guard grunted. Nothing like that here for decades. Just rats and junk. Best move along. His dismissal was curt, but he turned away, apparently satisfied. Alara had passed a small test, her calm demeanor holding. But the encounter solidified her feeling that 17B Schiller Alley was not a place one stumbled upon by accident. Something was being hidden. The rebuff from the security guard didn't deter Alara, it sharpened her resolve. She waited until he had moved further down the alley, then examined the door to 17B more closely. The lock was old, but sturdy. There were no obvious signs of forced entry, yet the faint scuff marks near the bottom suggested it had been opened, perhaps recently and with difficulty. She spent the next few days using her archival skills in a new way. At the library, during her breaks and after hours, she delved into municipal records, zoning permits, and old city directories related to Schiller Alley and the building itself. She discovered that 17B had once been leased to a small, independent archival storage company that went out of business over a decade ago. There was no record of a current tenant. The building itself was owned by a shell corporation with opaque leadership, a common tactic she knew from news reports about developers like Marcus Thorne. Her breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Remembering the barista, Sarah, at the Daily Grind, Alara decided to speak with her again. She found Sarah during a quiet afternoon lull. The man you helped, Sarah said, her voice low, glancing around. Mr. Henderson. He's my father's old friend. He's been very worried lately. He said if anyone asked about the address, I should say it was just a mistake. Alara showed Sarah the receipt. He seemed genuinely distressed, and he said it was urgent. Sarah hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Mr. Henderson used to be an accountant for a construction firm. A smaller one that got bought out by Thorne Development a few years ago. He said he found things, irregularities, that he couldn't ignore. He tried to talk to people, but no one would listen. Some bad things happened. He got scared. Sarah's eyes welled up. He thought that address, that little storage unit, was the only safe place for his research. He was trying to protect it, and maybe himself. The pieces began to click into place. Arthur Henderson wasn't just a forgetful old man. He was a potential whistleblower, terrified of the consequences. And Marcus Thorne, the charismatic developer threatening her beloved Oak Knoll, was likely at the center of it. The stakes suddenly felt immensely personal. Alara realized that the address wasn't just a cry for help, it was a key. She learned from Sarah that Mr. Henderson had a spare key to 17B, which he left with Sarah's father for safekeeping, just in case. With trembling hands, Sarah retrieved an old, labeled key from beneath the counter and pressed it into Alara's palm. He said if anything happened to him, someone honest needed to find what he'd hidden. I think he saw that in you. Armed with the key, Alara returned to Schiller Alley, this time under the cover of late afternoon shadows. The lock on door 17B turned with a rusty groan. Inside, the air was cold and musty. A single, bare bulb illuminated a small, cramped room filled with dusty boxes, old filing cabinets, and rolled-up blueprints. It was an archivist's nightmare, and yet a treasure trove. She began to sift through the contents, her heart pounding. Most of it was mundane, outdated invoices, old project files from Henderson's former employer. But in one specifically marked box, tucked away in a far corner, she found what Arthur Henderson had risked so much to protect: ledgers detailing financial discrepancies, copies of altered safety inspection reports, and, most damningly, a series of internal memos from Thorne development executives discussing strategies to mitigate community resistance through methods that bordered on intimidation and legal strong-arming for several past projects. There were even notes hinting at payoffs to city officials. Just as she was absorbing the gravity of her discovery, she heard a noise from the alley, footsteps, voices. Her blood ran cold. She quickly doused the light and pressed herself against a stack of boxes, peering through a crack in the grimy window. Two men in dark suits were examining the door to 17B. One of them was Thorne's chief of security, a man she recognized from photos online. Anything? One asked. Door's still locked. Henderson hasn't been back, the security chief replied. Thorne wants this loose end tied up before the Oak Knoll vote. He's getting antsy. Says Henderson was asking too many questions again before he disappeared off the radar. They moved on, their voices fading. Alara stayed hidden for a long time, her breath catching in her throat. Henderson wasn't just worried. He was actively being hunted. And now, so was she. The weight of the files in her hands felt immense. This was no longer just about saving a library. It was about exposing a dangerous, corrupt system. She knew she couldn't do this alone. She carefully repacked the most critical documents into her satchel, locked 17B, and slipped away, her mind racing. Her next stop was Mrs. Ainsworth, but not just for advice. She needed an ally and a plan. The quiet archivist was about to step out of the shadows. The upcoming city council vote on Thorne's Oak Knoll redevelopment project was only 2 weeks away. The pressure was on. Alara laid out the documents on Mrs. Ainsworth's cluttered desk in the library's back office. The older woman listened intently, her usual warmth replaced by a steely resolve as Alara recounted everything: the key, the hidden files, the men in Schiller Alley. Marcus Thorne, Mrs. Ainsworth said, her voice grim. I always knew there was something rotten beneath that polished veneer. Arthur Henderson is a brave man. And you, Alara, you are braver than you know. The documents were damning. Carefully annotated ledgers showing siphoned funds, falsified environmental reports for previous Thorne projects, and a paper trail that pointed towards a pattern of unethical, if not outright illegal, practices. The most explosive item was a small, encrypted flash drive Arthur had tucked inside a ledger. Alara, with her knack for systems, had a hunch about the password, perhaps a significant date or a name from his old company. After several attempts, she tried Oak Knoll 78, combining the threatened library with the year it was founded. The drive unlocked. It contained copies of emails and internal communications from Thorne Development detailing plans to undervalue properties in the Oak Knoll district, pressure businesses to sell, and even a memo outlining a strategy to discredit community leaders who opposed them, including Mrs. Ainsworth herself. They now possessed clear, irrefutable evidence of Thorne's corruption. The question was how to use it. Going to the authorities felt risky. Thorne was well-connected, and the information could be buried or dismissed. The city council vote on the Oak Knoll project was looming, a deadline that added an almost unbearable pressure. Thorne was scheduled to give a final presentation at a public town hall meeting the night before the vote, a PR move designed to showcase his supposed commitment to the community. That's our stage, Mrs. Ainsworth declared, a spark in her eyes. He wants a public forum? We'll give him one he won't forget. Their plan began to take shape. It was audacious and fraught with risk. They would need to be meticulous, strategic. Alara would compile and organize the evidence into a clear, undeniable presentation. Mrs. Ainsworth would use her community connections to ensure a large, vocal turnout at the town hall, including independent journalists she trusted. Sarah, Mr. Henderson's friend's daughter, agreed to help discreetly distribute flyers and spread the word online, ensuring the meeting wasn't just the usual attendees. Alara spent every spare moment over the next week locked in the library's archive, cross-referencing Henderson's files, creating digital copies, and preparing a concise, powerful narrative. She felt a transformation occurring within her. The quiet observer was becoming an active participant, her innate sense of order and justice now fiercely engaged. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by a growing determination. This was bigger than her, bigger than the library. It was about the soul of their community. The night before the town hall, Alara felt a strange calm. She had done everything she could. The evidence was ready. The stage was set. The community hall buzzed with an energy that was more than just the usual civic engagement. It was thick with anticipation, an undercurrent of defiance. Mrs. Ainsworth had done her work well. The room was packed, standing room only, with concerned residents, local activists, and several reporters, notebooks, and cameras ready. On the brightly lit stage, Marcus Thorne exuded his trademark confidence, his expensive suit impeccable, his smile disarming as he began his presentation, painting a glossy picture of progress and prosperity that his Oak Knoll project would supposedly bring. He spoke of revitalized spaces and economic boons, his voice smooth and persuasive. Alara sat in the front row with Mrs. Ainsworth, her satchel containing the flash drive and key documents resting on her lap. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She focused on her breathing, on the faces in the crowd, faces of her neighbors, people whose lives would be irrevocably changed by Thorne's plans. When Thorne opened the floor for questions, Mrs. Ainsworth was the first to stand. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice clear and steady, carrying through the hushed hall, "your vision for Oak Knoll is certainly ambitious. But some of us are concerned about the methods Thorne Development has employed in the past and perhaps in the present." Thorne's smile tightened infinitesimally. "We operate with the utmost integrity, Mrs. Ainsworth, as our track record shows." This was Alara's cue. She rose, stepping forward to the microphone. All eyes turned to her, this quiet woman few recognized. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice surprisingly firm, though her hands trembled slightly. "My name is Alara Washington. I'm an archivist at the Oak Knoll Library, and I have some archival material I believe this community and the city council needs to see before any vote is taken." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Thorne's expression shifted from condescension to wary attention. Material relevant to Thorne Development's practices. Alara calmly connected the flash drive to the projector system. The first image that flashed onto the large screen behind Thorne was a scanned copy of one of Arthur Henderson's incriminating ledgers, followed by an internal Thorne Development memo detailing the strategy to neutralize community opposition. Gasps and angry shouts erupted. Thorne, momentarily stunned, tried to regain control. "This is outrageous. These are fabrications, slander." But Alara continued, her voice gaining strength with each piece of evidence she presented. She showed the falsified reports, the emails, the plans to undervalue properties. She narrated coolly, methodically, her archivist training allowing her to present the complex information with undeniable clarity. She wasn't accusatory, she simply laid out the facts, letting them speak for themselves. The internal struggle was immense, the fear of reprisal, the weight of so many hopes resting on her shoulders, but she pushed through, fueled by a profound sense of justice for Arthur Henderson, for Mrs. Ainsworth, for her community. The moral victory was palpable long before any official judgment. Thorne's polished facade began to crack. He stammered, trying to dismiss the evidence, but the sheer volume and specificity of it were overwhelming. The reporters were scribbling furiously, cameras flashing. The decisive turning point came when Alara played a short audio snippet from the flash drive, a recorded call where a Thorne executive clearly discussed pressuring a city official. The hall fell into a stunned silence, then erupted into uproar. Marcus Thorne stood exposed, his carefully constructed image shattered by the quiet courage of one woman and the meticulous records of another. He looked not like a powerful developer, but a common cheat. In the immediate aftermath of the town hall explosion, a profound sense of peace settled over Alara. As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with the revelations, Mrs. Ainsworth enveloped her in a fierce, proud hug. "You did it, child," she whispered, her eyes shining. "You truly did it." Sarah, the barista, found her moments later, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she managed, her voice choked with emotion. "For Mr. Henderson. For all of us." The air in the hall, once thick with tension, now felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. The next morning, the city was ablaze with the news. The city council immediately announced a full-scale investigation into Thorn Development's practices and the allegations of corruption. The Oak Knoll redevelopment project was suspended indefinitely, and there was swift talk of new, stringent oversight policies for all future development projects. Arthur Henderson, assured of his safety by the public nature of the exposé, emerged from hiding a few days later. He met Alara at the daily grind, his eyes filled with a gratitude that needed no words. He simply took her hand, his grip firm. "You gave me my voice back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "More than that, you gave our community a fighting chance." Alara was later approached by a newly formed Citizens Oversight Committee, invited to lend her meticulous eye and unwavering integrity to their work, an offer she quietly considered. The healing for the community would be an ongoing process, the victory hard-earned, but not a final guarantee of peace. Yet, there was a renewed sense of hope, a belief that their voices mattered. Alara returned to her work at the Oak Knoll Library, to the quiet hum of its archives. But something had shifted. She walked with a new lightness, a quiet confidence that resonated in the way she carried herself, the way she met people's eyes. The community, once perhaps oblivious to the depth of her character, now saw her, acknowledged her. Mrs. Ainsworth's beloved library was safe, for now, and it felt more vibrant than ever, a true heart of the neighborhood. Alara often found herself back at the daily grind, sipping her coffee, no longer just an overlooked figure in a quiet corner. She would look out at the familiar streets, at the people going about their lives, and a small, knowing smile would touch her lips. The quiet genius had found her voice, and in doing so, had helped her community find its own. This is the power of quiet courage, of integrity standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds. It reminds us that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest acts of human connection. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.